All right. Ayahuasca first ceremony. Me and Amy got here on Friday, and Stacy, the owner, he showed us around, and then Drew kind of ran us through what was going to go on. Me and Amy came in kind of like at a weird time because there are only 9 people allowed here at a time, but me and Amy came in toward the end, basically, of a lot of people's cycle, I guess. Like 4 people left yesterday, and me and Amy were the only new people coming in, and so it was really interesting for our first ceremony to be around all of these people who, a lot of them, it was their last ceremony. You know, I've done so much research, but still didn't know what to expect. And so it's great because, yeah, the guys that run the show here, Stacy and Drew, they really, like, help you out. Yeah, like, you know, so much of this is about your intention and, you know, doing it for the right reasons, and learning to not have expectations and let go and accept the process, accept what's happening. Ayahuasca in general is a very, everyone who experiences it has a very unique journey. And that's why the intention helps so much. So, you know, like, everyone who we've talked to here has said when you go up to get your little shot of ayahuasca, you talk to her. You hold her in your hand and you tell her your intention. And so my intention for the first ceremony was, I am open, help me let go. Letting go is my biggest problem. At least I thought so. A lot came up. And I think, like, it's kind of hard to pinpoint your biggest problem. Honestly, especially if you have a lot of problems. But, you know. So anyways, that was my intention. Didn't really know what to expect. Drew kept saying that it's very common to not really have much happen on your first ceremony. Me and Amy, since it was our first time too, like, we only got half a shot, whereas other people, they were getting a full dose, which is like the full shot glass. And some people even had 2 doses plus other stuff. So yeah, like, it was like a really nice introduction to what ayahuasca is and what it feels like. Amy actually didn't really feel that much, but the day before we got here, we did combo, and the guy that we did combo with, I had a pretty powerful experience with that, and I purged a lot. And he told me, he was like, you're going to have a great ceremony tomorrow. You still have a lot in there, but it's going to be really great for you. And even despite that, you know, I was still trying to lower my expectations. And, you know, like, I realized over time that one of my biggest issues is that I kind of put myself in a box. As much as I want to be free, you know, the way that I was raised, I kind of just naturally, like, adhere to certain rules. I'm a rule breaker and a rebel in other ways, but in the ways that I want to be free, like, mentally, I can't. So when Drew was going over all these rules when he was going over all these things, he kept saying, like, don't have expectations. And I'm like, how do you not have expectations? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. And, you know, like, I've been telling myself, like, don't have these expectations. But, you know, I don't think that it's easy to let go when you don't know what it feels like to let go. So that's why that is what my intention was. The ayahuasca itself, a lot of people talk about how it tastes really bad, like tastes really like the bitterest, nastiest stuff you ever tasted or something like that. But honestly, like, it wasn't that bad to me, and it wasn't that bad to Amy either. And there's a guy in our group too, he said that it tastes familiar. When you're staying in the jungle like this, there are certain smells, and just like the feeling that you get here, it just tastes like the jungle. Like, it tastes like it belongs here, and so it was really nice in that way. But yeah, so I think because I had purged a lot with the combo, and we also, like, the day that we came in for ceremony, we only had breakfast. And so the biggest thing that I'm realizing now, like, watching all these ayahuasca videos and trying to prepare for this, nothing can really prepare you. And that's something that Drew said too. He said, okay, coming into this, forget all the YouTube videos, because you get such a uniquely you experience. And that was important to remember, because yeah, he was talking about like how it really does make you face your fears. And he said that Stacy always says you let your fears in to have a cup of tea, because basically they kept reiterating, like, don't, like, as scary as something is, you're here to get over your fear, and your fear is you. Like, that is a part of you. And so you just have to accept it and let it pass. And even just listening to Drew talk about all this stuff, I was like, oh God, like, I was like already crying. I'm like, oh shit, like, what is gonna happen here? The combo made me really emotional, and also really energetic. And so, like, I felt really prepared for this. So I wasn't like scared, but I was like emotional. So, off the bat, like, ayahuasca is going to be a difficult experience to explain to people. I've done psychedelics before, and I think the closest thing that I've come to this is shrooms, because, it's very natural. You kind of like see like distortions in reality that are similar and very like organic and colorful. But yeah, like, considering too that we were having a half dose, I didn't think much would happen. But so it seemed like things started happening pretty quick, but I didn't really understand much what was going on. Hopefully tomorrow things are more clear in general. But yeah, like it seems like the biggest thing about ayahuasca is purging, because they were talking about how until you purge, you won't necessarily have a clear vision or start to have clear visions. And so, like, what happens is everybody gets their shot, and then they say, wait 20 minutes. Even if you feel like you need to purge, try your best to wait 20 minutes until the curanderos start singing their icaros, their songs that they sing. They sing them the whole night, because each song kind of like, it guides you in a way. And toward the end of the night, it moves into songs that are specifically for people, and they're called limpiezas, to cleanse each person of what they're going through. Because essentially what's happening is that the shaman is going in, seeing where the problem is with you, and trying to fix it. And then the limpieza at the end is like, okay, they have a good sense of where everyone is at, what visions, like, or things that have been happening with people throughout the night. And then they go in and work on your specific issue, which is really cool. And I didn't know that. But yeah, so anyways, 20 minutes after the ayahuasca, curandero started singing. And this is I've heard Icaros online, just from the nature of researching these videos, but hearing hearing these songs in person is very powerful. It just, you feel it in your soul. So Drew is describing purging as a lot of things. A lot of people think that it's just vomiting and diarrhea. And when you're researching ayahuasca, you hear a lot about that. But honestly, it's not that bad. I mean, I think it can be bad, but you really start to have a sensation before you throw up, and even before you need to shit. And there's also a lot of different types of purging. A lot happens to your body while you're on this thing. Good examples are yawning, burping. You're trying to get out. The point of purging is you're trying to get out all these repressed energies inside of you to cleanse the toxins. It's not only the food that you've eaten, it's the emotions that you've kept hidden, repressed. So immediately when the Icaros started, I just cried. Like, I was sobbing, and I was the only one doing this. Drew and Stacy, they talk about how these ceremonies tend to be pretty quiet. The cool thing about Dreamglade is that they aren't trying to make you freak out. Drew explains it as they're not trying to put on a light show for Westerners, basically. What they're doing is they're trying to administer healing to people, like real legit healing. And so the shamans that they've got, they're from like, a great lineage, their brother, sister. And so people talk all the time about why research is so important, and it's because you have to find a shaman who's doing it for the right reasons. And the shamans who are here, the ceremonies tend to be really quiet because they want to gently heal you. All they're concerned about is finding out what's wrong with you. Whereas apparently in other places, which I've heard even from one of the guys who was here, because he's been at different retreats, they tend to be called brujos, where the shamans like tend to compete with each other, or like even steal energies from people, and people might leave the ceremony worse off than they were when they got there. So yeah, like, this is a really safe place. And they kept saying that too. Like, they put a lot of protection in the area from like bad spirits, and they remind you that no matter what happens to you in this space, you're going to be safe. And that was really nice going in. So when this purging process started, my purge, a lot of it was emotion that I've had repressed. So I was just crying for a long time. And then I started like noticing like the ceremony is done in this like circular space called a maloca, and then all of us are like in a circle on these like cots, like little mattresses on the ground. And so like there is like this like window, and you can see to the outside, and so it's basically pitch black when all this is going on, but you can like see kind of like the light of the jungle through the windows, kind of like how this is like a screen, but the maloca is only like a little bit like that. And so I started realizing that like it was changing. Like there were just my perception was off. Like I couldn't tell like what was a shadow and what wasn't, because sometimes the shadows seemed like they were moving. There was a point in the night where there were like bits of light that were along the roof, and then they all looked like these like shadowy white faces, and they were like they're like had mouths that were moving to the Icaros, which was kind of creepy. Like a lot of this first ceremony for me was kind of creepy, because yeah, like Stacy came over at one point and he was like, "Oh, did you purge? No purge yet," because he was like looking in my bucket to see if I had vomited, and I hadn't yet. I had just cried a lot. But he was like asking me how I was, and I said like, "Oh, just I don't understand what's going on. There's kind of like a lot of things happening around me, but," and he was like, "Oh, nothing too clear yet? Okay, well, you're fine." And so, yeah, like, especially like the first kind of, I think, half of the ceremony, your perception of time is so off that you really don't know how much time has passed at all. But I think that my experience can be summed up into this timeline of the beginning was pretty bad. Pretty bad in terms of like I couldn't stop crying. And I thought I was so loud and disturbing everybody else. Like that I couldn't focus on myself. And they tell you need to focus on yourself. There's a lot of people in here. There's a lot of energies. And also my friend Amy's there. And so they're like, you can't let yourself be distracted by all these things. But I did, because that is always what I do. I always am so self-conscious thinking about what other people are doing around me. And it made me see this is why I have like a lot of anxiety, especially at work, because, you know, it came from a lot of like my childhood anxiety at school, where I would like hide at recess because I didn't, you know, want the pressure of finding somebody to hang out with. And, you know, it's like all awkward and stuff. And you know, I would get like bullied, and I didn't really have like, I didn't feel like I had like real friends that were fun to hang out with. So I would like isolate myself from people. And I do the same thing kind of at work, because it reminds me of a school type environment. And that's what I was actually really worried about coming here, because I'm like, oh, there's going to be a lot of people. I'm going to have so much anxiety. Like, how am I going to deal with this? But yeah, so it was really bad in the beginning for that reason. Like I was so focused. Oh yeah. And they put me by the door. So there's this door, and like people are going in and out to go to the restroom. And that gave me a lot of anxiety, because every time someone walked by, I would like look at them, and this got really weird. Like throughout the night, this got weirder and weirder, this door situation. But anyways, I'll talk more about that later. So yeah, back to the crying and stuff. I realized that the more I cried, and the more I, you know, purging also includes burping and yawning. And, you know, Drew also had mentioned that parts of your body might start involuntarily shaking and you can't control it. And that also happened, during this really kind of bad, dark part of it. The more that I purged, the more things would get a little weird around me. There were times when, you know, like the floor disappeared, and like my whole body disappeared, and I tried to look at my hands, but there was like nothing there. And I started like noticing these kind of like weird, like wavy energies, I guess is the best way to describe it, around me, that were like in a circle around me, that were like coming, you know, like I could feel them like pulsing toward me, but I couldn't like tell what they were. Like that's why it was very hazy. There were like shadows of like hints of color, if that makes sense. And then at a certain point, I felt like they were kind of like had like arms out like this, like kind of coming in and out like this, like doing this to me. And so I was like, what is this, you know? And so it was all very unclear, and I was still trying to get the hang of like what was happening. But yeah, like eventually I got really, really cold, and I was shaking like so hard, to the point of like I felt like I was gonna like, I didn't know how I was going to handle it, and I was hoping that it wouldn't last the whole night. I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't know how much more I can handle. I was like in this like position like this, just like shaking, like, oh my gosh, like when will this end? And it was really funny, because one of one of the things that Drew said was, there are no martyrs here. Meaning, like, he said, if you're having trouble, call help over. And I was like, how do you call for help? I didn't, because, you know, when all this stuff is going on, like, they said, like, yeah, if you need help, like, call for one of us or something. And because one of my problems is that I never know when to ask for help. I always feel bad asking for help. And so, this point where I was like shaking, and super cold, I was like, I need to ask for help, I need to ask for help, but I didn't know how, and so I was like, help, help, and then finally, I was like, help, and then Stacy came over, and then, he was like, well, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm really cold, and I'm shaking, I don't know how to stop this, meh. And then he was like, well, why don't you just put a blanket on? And another thing that Drew said was, if you are freaking out, you need to ask for help, because they can kind of get you through something that would be so painful that feels like it lasts an eternity, and they can get you through in like 5 minutes. Whereas if you didn't call for help, you would just be suffering through that. And that's basically what I was doing. It felt like an eternity that I was shaking and cold and suffering. But as soon as Stacy came over and just told me to put this blanket on, like, I was fine. And that was like really kind of the first instance where things started getting better. And then after that, I started like, I only like vomited like a couple times. Like and because I didn't really have any food in my stomach, I knew that it was some deep, dark shit. And that's what they say, that it's not normal vomit. It's like this weird, like, gunk that's inside of you. And you see it in your bucket, like, especially when they shine a light in it, it's just like this, like, gross shit. Like the best way I can describe it, too, is like, in Miyazaki's, like, Spirited Away. Actually, this whole experience feels like a Miyazaki movie, but in the Amazon. Because you're dealing with like these like entities and they're nature entities, because yeah, like the whole point of this is, you know, the shamans, they're calling in all of these spirits, from plants, you know, animals, just the whole jungle they're calling in to help heal you. And like even, you know, like something else that you can do in conjunction with ayahuasca is plant dieta, which is where you ingest a plant that helps you work with Mother Ayahuasca. And so me and Amy were on one called Ahosacha, which is like a good beginner one to like help you open yourself up to her and things like that. And so they would call, like, you can like hear in the Icaros like them calling on these different plants and things like that, which is really cool. And so yeah, like purging, it's like in Spirited Away when Haku, he like throws up this black like worm, and Chihiro like steps on it, and then you know, because it like represents the control that he's like being controlled, and that's essentially like what it is. It's like inside of you, you're being controlled by all of this like gross stuff that's just like built up over the years, and you're trying to get rid of that. And so it's really nasty stuff, and that's why it's really hard to get out, but it feels really good when it comes out. Like it starts like you feel like something in your stomach like wanting to come out, like a creature almost, and then it comes out. And so I really hope that I can get more of it out tomorrow, because yeah, I didn't really get much of it out. It was mostly crying and shaking and the first night, but yeah, after I started purging these things and also learned how to ask for help, it was really cool, because I started like noticing that there's this kind of like, when your eyes are open, there's this like surface world, which is the maloka around you, like, and you just, it's like darkness, and you like see these shadows that are kind of creepy because you don't know what they are. But like, you know, there's also like people, there's like a watchman guy who like walks around here and with like a flashlight, and also like the first ceremony there was also like lightning happening, which was really cool. So you'd like occasionally see like lightning coming through. But yeah, so when you close your eyes, that's kind of like when you have like So the way that I describe it is like I started realizing that, and this was when, so there's like a female shaman, Lydia, here, and male shaman, Raul. And so it's really nice to have these like masculine and feminine energies. Then they take turns singing. And so the first time I started realizing this was when Raul was singing. But yeah, so when my eyes were closed, I felt like the jungle, like I was the jungle. Like the sounds are so just like, they become you. And then the more you're able to let go, like there was one time that Stacy came over to me and he was like, just remember to accept everything that's happening. And I kept trying to repeat that to myself because, you know, the nature of our minds is that we overthink things. And, you know, like I kept thinking like, oh, like, you know, stuff like, oh my gosh, like what is going on? And like when something cool would happen, I'd be like, how can I take this back with me to work on myself and stuff like that. And every time that would happen, like things would quiet down a little bit. But then when I would try to turn off my mind, and just kind of like lie there and just not move, like you start feeling like your body is disappearing, which is like the weirdest feeling, but it's really cool. But yeah, you feel like your body's disappearing, and then if you close your eyes, you can like start seeing things. Like but things for me were like really unclear. But I think it's because I was starting to get the hang of like seeing these things. But because they're kind of like just like, yeah, like it was so strange. Like the first thing that happened was I saw this kind of like goopy like alive mass that was like pulsing like this, and then little things started growing out of it with like teeth at the end, kind of like an alien but not as creepy. And then like they were like weird colors, like tons of different colors, and then there were like two halves of it that were like moving toward each other like this, like that. And it was like so weird, kind of gross, but I also felt like it was like nice, and I don't know what it was. And then there was like another instance where there was like an eye. That's another thing too. Whenever I would like open and close my eyes, I would see these eyes that looked like, it kind of looks like like this, like a jaguar eye, or like a very like cat like feline eye. And so yeah, I would just see like those eyes flash like every time I opened and closed, like every time I blinked, which was like really cool. But yeah, so this time when Raul was singing and I had my eyes closed, like there was that happened, and then there was like this like eye that was like part of like a snake, and then like the snake like weirdly like started building like layers on top of itself, like armor. And then the same thing happened with like a hummingbird type creature where it was like a huge eye, and then it was like puffy like this, but then it started building armor around itself. That's like the best way I can describe it. It's so weird. But yeah, so when I started realizing that I was seeing things in my mind when my eyes were closed, I was like, what can I see when my eyes are open? And so like it was really nice because I was like, oh yeah, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling better. And so I was like swaying with the music like this, because the Icaros are so nice. And so I was swaying with the music like this, and then I started seeing like shadows like move up the walls of the Maloka, where when my eyes were open, and I started getting this really uneasy feeling. But then I was like, nope, just accept it. But then it became more and more uneasy. I'm getting like goosebumps thinking about it, because every time I talk about this, it creeps me out. But so yeah, people were constantly like walking by me, and my bucket was like positioned so that I was like sitting looking down at it, and my back was to the door. And so like I would hear people like walking back and forth like to the restroom like behind my back. And then I started like hearing this like breathing that was like right here, and it started like further away, and then it got closer and closer, and it was like and so it was like that, and it became like right in my ear, and then the door slammed like shut, like, and it was weird because like everyone was walking through the door really quietly, like being really respectful, and then the door slammed, and I like was so shocked by it that I turned around like really quickly, and then I saw something there. Like I can't describe what it was. It was kind of like a skeletal figure, kind of like the shadows, like these white shadows that I was talking about earlier, where they were like, they had like mouths, like talking, but it was like the spirit, like it seemed like this spirit guy, like he just like was like this to me, like kind of like those screamer videos where like it's all nice and stuff and you're just listening to music, and then like this like scary shit like pops up. Like that's what happened, and I screamed. And then like I heard people like exclaiming around like, what was that or something, and I was like, oh my god, like I was so embarrassed. And then immediately like Stacy and Drew came over. I was like embarrassed, but I was also like scared, like I was terrified. I'm like, what the fuck was that? And so like I was like, oh my god. Like, so they came over and they immediately, and they were like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I couldn't even vocalize what it was. Like I was like breathing, scary, scary breathing. Something was there, something's there. And I was like freaking out. And then like Stacy had to go do something else. And so, but Drew stayed with me, and he was like, okay, I'm going to show you that there's nothing here. And he like shined his flashlight, like when you're a kid and, you know, like you think that's like a lot of what this experience feels like you're a kid and there's like weird shadows and you don't know what it is, and you think there's monsters in the night, and, you know, someone needs to tell you otherwise. That's what it feels like. And so he was like shining this light, being like, look, there's nothing here. And he was like saying, look, here are your tissues, and here's this and this, like this is all that's here. And I was like hyperventilating. I was like, oh my god, like I don't want this thing to come back. And he was like, do you still hear the breathing? I'm like, no. And so he like stayed there with me, and I like curled up in this fetal position. I was like rocking back and forth, and then I just started like sobbing. And he was like, all right, just have a good cry. And he's like, I'm not going to leave you until you feel better. And he didn't. And it was like really nice that he did that. And like, you know, the way that he and Stacy help you, like because you feel so alone when you're going through this. Like it's nice because you feel the energies of everyone around you, but yeah, like at the same time you're alone in what you're experiencing. And so it's nice whenever they come over, because it kind of like snaps you back to, oh, this is just something that will pass. Like what he was saying in the beginning, like all of this is you, things that you have to get over and understand about yourself, and it will pass. And so after Drew came by and that happened, oh yeah, another thing that happened was that I went to the bathroom by myself, and like toward the beginning, and then everything was so weird. Like they tell you to stay in the Maloka as much as possible because you'll be safe there, but you have to go to the bathroom sometimes, like to pee or shit, or so I heard people throwing up in there. But yeah, so there's like this really cute dog here. There are 3 dogs and they're all really cute, but this specific one, his name is Shantine. And he was like in between the Maloka and the bathroom, like, and I felt like he was protecting us. But because he didn't leave like the whole ceremony, and they told me, oh, Shantine like is always there at these ceremonies, and so like you walk past him when you're going to the bathroom. And so he was like lying there, and I love this dog. Like I loved this dog like when I first got here even, and I miss like my dog so much while I'm here, but it's nice to have these dogs. Anyways, so I walked past Shantine, and I have this weird thing with dogs whenever I'm on psychedelics where I see them like decaying, because like I think about like how humans have these dogs and like they belong in nature and whatever. Anyways, I mean, they don't like, I mean, we've like evolved them to like be our companions, but it like makes me sad sometimes that they're, you know, trapped in like a house or whatever. Anyways, so I was like walking past Shantine, and I had this fear of like seeing him decay. Like I had seen like our dog Han decaying, and like our old dog Einstein decaying, and so I walked past him and thought he like looked strange. Like everything was kind of like pulsing and like weird colors. And then so I saw him, and he like looked at me, and then he like put his head back down, and then he started like transforming into this like creature, this huge creature that, you know, I was like wondering if it was like kind of like a jaguar, because like he like started like growing like spots and stuff, and I was like, what is this, you know? And so that like freaked me out. I ran to the bathroom, ran back. But then like the second time I went to the bathroom, I was like so scared, and by that time I was like used to calling for help, so I called Drew to like help me to the bathroom. And just being there with somebody going to the bathroom, like he was like, because I was like, I'm so scared, I'm so scared. And he was like, I'm not leaving until you're done, you know? And so like he stayed out there, and then on our way back, like I saw Shantine again, and because I was with a person, like I didn't feel alone. And seeing Shantine, he was like normal again, and he was so happy to see me, and he was like wagging his tail, and I was like petting him, and I just like hugged him, I like clung to him, and he was like loving it. And then we tried to leave, and then Drew was like, look at this guy, he wants to be pet all the time. And so we were like both petting him, and it was so nice. And I think that connection with like this connection with nature, like it really helped open me up. So when I got back, like it was really crazy because I was doing the thing again where I had my eyes open, and this time Lydia was singing, and when Lydia was singing, I started seeing these like lights, like this like bright light kind of like rotating around the room. And then, you know, it was kind of hard to tell because like there was like lightning that was coming through the window. And then there was like, you know, sometimes a guy that would walk around with a flashlight. But so it looked kind of like the guy was walking around with a flashlight. So I was like, that might just be a flashlight. But then I kept looking because I started seeing this like really bright light that kind of looked like a star from far away, and there are a lot of fireflies here, so I was like, I wonder if this is just like an animal, just whatever. But it like started from far away, and then it started peeking from behind trees, and then I was like, whoa, like what is that? And and then it started like, so it was like this triangle that was like glowing, like it was this glowing triangle with like something in the middle, some glowy thing in the middle, that looked kind of like a star, I guess, the best way to describe it. And so it was like peeking from behind trees, and then it was like flashing, and it flashed like flash, 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 flash. And it did a bunch of that, and I was like, and I sat up, and this is the first time I didn't feel high at all. I felt like me, like normal me. I like sat up, and I was like, what is that? Like, what am I looking at right now? And then it like, so it was like far away, and it started coming closer, closer, closer. It didn't come inside the Moloko. It was like right outside the window. But it got like really big, and it just like hovered there and like stayed there and like just like looked at me, I guess, what it was doing. And I was just like, whoa, what is that? And I like stared at it. And I have never, like, on shrooms and LSD, whatever, I've never seen anything like that. Like, I've never like had something that clear. Like, and I felt like it was something, like it was an entity, and it was so magical. And I realized that, like, I've lost this magic in my life, and, you know, I've been trying to remember who I am, and part of that is this relationship I have to magic. And I love magic so much. I see art as magic. I see, like, I get so many strong feelings from a lot of, like, movies or, like, you know, like, books or, like, anything that people make. And I'm like, where does this come from? You know, it comes from somewhere beyond us. But I can't harness that myself for some reason, and that makes me feel really crippled when I try to do art. And I try to just even, like, understand who I am. And, I know that I knew who I was when I was a kid, like a really young kid. But somewhere along the line, I lost myself. And that's why I wanted to come here. And seeing this entity, I was like, magic is fucking real. And this is what it is. I see it in front of me. And it was like the greatest feeling, and I just wanted to see it again, you know. But I was like, okay, this might be the best thing that I get tonight. And there was like another point in the night where there was another thing that showed up that wasn't a triangle, but it was like this shape that was like this. I don't know if that's even easy to see, but it was like also like kind of this like outline of this like blue light, and it was glowing. It was really bright. And so, but those were like and I could tell it was also entity, but it wasn't as magical as the first one, where it was like, ooh, here. And it like, cause it was like flashing, and I could tell that it was not anything. It was nothing I have ever seen before in my life. And so like, yeah, and that was like, and after that, like the rest of the night was great. Like I was able to just accept and like lie back and just enjoy the rest of the ceremony. And like I recognize that there's a lot that I'm not going to understand, but that's okay. There were a lot of times like, yeah, like that, you know, another girl who works here, she's volunteering here, Matia, I saw her by the bathroom, and she was like, how's it going? And I was like, there's so much that I don't understand, and I'm not sure how to handle it. And she said, that's how it is. A lot of what you'll see, you won't understand right away. It might take days, weeks, months, years, who knows? You might never understand it. And you have to accept that, and like just know that it's changing you in some way. And but to not let that distract you. Like don't keep trying to understand it when it happens. And so yeah, like it was really powerful to me, like experiencing that entity. And I brought it up in the talk the next morning. It was a really emotional talk for me. Like I kind of rambled on and stuff like that. But it was like a really powerful experience. And Stacy, he had said, like, when me and Amy got here, I asked him about bipolar, because being diagnosed as bipolar, they like worry about you like doing this. And I almost wasn't allowed to come, and I had to like, you know, they have a screening process, which is great. They turn people away all the time, he said, because they want to make sure that the right people are here, the right energies, you know, and to make it as safe as possible. And so I asked him about bipolar, and he was like, you know, like a lot of people aren't actually what they're diagnosed as, because you know, that's just what Western medicine does. Like they want to sell you drugs. And you know, so he said that he was really curious to see what was actually going on with me. He's like, maybe you're bipolar, like maybe you're not, like who knows, because he told me like this story about how there was like a schizophrenic kid who everyone kept giving him medication, and it like messed him up, and he like went to like, you know, like this mental institution. But then they brought in like this African shaman to see him, and then they said that he actually was like trying to commune with spirits, and he was a healer. And then rather than being schizophrenic and crazy, and so the shaman like took him to train him to be a shaman, and he became a healer. And he also told me this story about like how they sometimes get people here, and the shamans, when they do their work on them, they find that part of their soul is missing, and it needs to be put back in the body. Me and Amy were like, where does the soul go, you know? And then he was just like, oh, it's just like kind of just outside of your body, and they have to put it back. And so when I brought all of this up in the talk, oh yeah, like something else too was my limpieza was so powerful. But like, so it was with Lydia, and so I couldn't help but like, when I was with Lydia, like hope that I could see another entity. But then I kept telling myself like, you can't expect this, you can't expect this. And so like it was like really powerful, because like after I let that go, like I just started like, I was like crying. And then she like did this thing where she grabbed the top of my head, and she was like this. And then they make like these like noises like shh, shh, like they're like doing stuff like blowing on you or whatever they do. So she was like grabbing like these energies from my head, like the top of my head, and then like doing it like around me and stuff. And then she like grabbed my hands like this, and then I was like, she felt so powerful that I couldn't help but like bow like this. And so I bowed like this, and then I started crying like into her hands. And then she said yes. And then I heard like Raul next to her go, mm-hmm. And I was like, ooh, I must be doing good. Yay, something good is happening. So I was really curious to see what they were going to say about it the next day. And then when all of this happened, and Stacy was talking to me about like fears, and he said something great. He said something great like worry is the greatest enemy of imagination, or something like that. I forget, I wrote it down, but something like that. And I thought that was so great because I'm constantly worrying and all this anxiety. And then so he asked the curanderos, like after I spoke, like what was wrong with her, and then he, they speak in Spanish, so he translates, and he looked at me and he was like, remember what I was telling you on our way here about the soul? And he said, that's what happened to you. You were missing part of your soul. And I was like, oh my God, really? And he said, yeah, but they put it back. And then like, I was like, are you sure? And then he like asked Raul, he was like, is she okay? And then he was like, yeah, she's okay. And I was like, holy shit. And what it reminded me of was when I saw this entity, it reminded me of Howl's Moving Castle. And there's like this point where there's like all these like tribal like star entities where their head is like a star, and then there's like this chant that's going on, and they're in a circle like going around him and stuff. When I saw that entity, like it was very reminiscent of that, but it wasn't that, but like and then I asked Drew about it yesterday too, because we had this long ass talk yesterday about, he was telling me how in the past 2 years there have been only like around 50-ish people who've come in with part of their soul missing. And so he said that like what happens, when you're missing part of your soul is that you kind of have this like prevailing feeling that something is off or not right about your life, and no matter what you do, you can't fix it. And like that is how I felt. Like I felt like so much, I'd done so much and nothing was changing. And he said too that like that is like the reason for this constant anxiety, and he said that when your soul is put back, it's like a roommate that comes back after a while. And so kind of like you're like, when it's coming back into your body, there's like this reintegration process of it's trying to figure out who you are now, and what it's doing back inside of you. And so, but it always gets better. And he said that like all these people who have like a missing part of their soul, it like happens from some childhood trauma, like that is so traumatic that it jolts part of your soul out of you. And I feel so lucky because I'm so glad that I got it back on the first ceremony. Like a lot of people said that they didn't even experience anything their first ceremony, and so I got this really powerful experience where I got my soul back. So like it's really exciting because I don't know what's going to happen from here, but I definitely do feel different. I feel like this is a new beginning, and I feel like I guess, yeah, that is the best way to describe it. It's like maybe now my heart can be whole and I can move forward. And yeah, it's really great. This has already been really long, and I have to go get breakfast because I see them all getting breakfast now. But I really wanted to get this out because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Maybe nothing will happen, but I'm curious to see what it means now that I have my soul back. All right, well, I guess I'll talk about the second ceremony when it happens. Bye!